Meet Josafina, an American Girl by Valerie Tripp. Illustrations by Jean Paul Tibbles and vignettes by Susan McAlley. Chapter 1. Primroses. Josafina Montoya hummed to herself as she stood in the sunshine waiting for her sisters. It was a bright, breezy morning in late summer, and the girls were going to the stream to wash clothes. Josafina's basket was full of laundry to be washed, but she didn't mind. She enjoyed going to the stream on a day like this. The sky was a deep, strong blue. Josafina wished she could touch it. She was sure it would feel smooth and cool. Josafina liked to stand just in front of her house, where the life of her papa's rancho was going on all around her. From here she could smell the sharp scent of smoke from the kitchen fire. She could see cows and sheep grazing in the pastures. Yellow grass rolled all the way to the dark green trees on the foothills of the mountains, and the mountains zigzagged up the sky. She could hear all the sounds of the rancho: chickens clucking, donkeys braying, dogs barking, birds chirping, workers hammering, and someone laughing. The sounds seemed like music to Josafina. The wind joined in the music when it rustled the leaves on the cottonwood trees, and always under it all was the murmur of the stream. Josafina shaded her eyes. Even from this far away she could see Papa. He sat very straight and tall on his horse. He was talking to the workers in the cornfield near the stream. The rancho had belonged to Papa's family for more than 100 years. All those years Papa's family had cared for the animals and the land. It was not an easy life. Everyone had to work hard. Some years there was plenty of rain, so the crops grew and the animals were healthy. Some years there was not enough rain, and the soil was dry and the animals went thirsty. But through good times and the bad, the rancho went on. It provided everything Josafina and her family needed to live. It gave them food, clothing, and shelter. Josafina loved the rancho. It was her home. She believed that it was the most beautiful place in all of New Mexico and all of the world. Josafina was dancing a little dance of impatience to go with the song she was humming, when her oldest sister Anna came outside to join her. "Josafina," Anna said, "you remind me of a little bird singing and hopping from one foot to another like that." "If I were a bird," said Josafina with a grin, "I could have flown to the stream and back 20 times by now. I've been waiting and waiting for you. Where are Francisca and Clara?" Anna sighed. "They're coming," she said. They couldn't agree on whose turn it was to carry the wash tub. Josafina and Anna looked at each other and shook their heads. They got along beautifully, but Francisca and Clara, the middle sisters, often disagreed. It was always over some silly little thing. They remind Josafina of goats she had seen ramming into each other head to head for no particular reason. When the girls appeared at last, it was easy to see who had won the argument. Francisca, looking pleased with herself, carried only a basket of laundry balanced on her head. Clara, looking cross, carried a large copper wash tub. Josefina put her basket into the copper tub. "I'll take one handle of the tub, Clara," she said. "We'll carry it between us." Clara said, "Gracias," but she sounded more grumpy than grateful. Josefina knew a way to cheer her up. "Let's race to the stream," she said. "Oh, no," Francisca began to say. She didn't like to do anything that might mess her clothes or her hair. But Josefina and Clara had already taken off running, so Anna and Francisca had to run too. The sisters flew down the dirt path that sloped past the fruit trees, past the fields, and to the stream. Josefina and Clara reached the stream first, plunked the tub down, kicked off their moccasins, and ran into the shallow water. Then they turned and scooped up handfuls of water to splash Anna and Francisca, who shrieked with laughter as the water hit them. "Stop!" cried Francisca. She held up her basket to shield her face. "Now, girls," Anna scolded them gently, "we've come to wash the clothes that are in our baskets, not the ones we are wearing." "Not the ones we're wearing?" Josefina and Clara stopped splashing. They were out of breath anyway. They filled the copper tub with water from the stream. Josefina knelt next to the tub. She took the root of the umacha plant out of the little leather pouch she wore around her waist, and then pounded it between two rocks. The shredded yacha root made a nice lather of soapy bubbles in the water. Josefina put a dirty shirt in the tub and scrubbed it all over. Then she swooshed it around in the stream to rinse out the soap. The sun was hot on her head and her back, and the water was cool on her arms and hands. Josefina liked to think about how the water started out as snow on the mountaintops. It melted and flowed all the way down to this little pool in the stream without ever losing its cool freshness. She knew that it was water that brought life to the rancho. Water from the stream was channeled into ditches so that it would flow through the fields. Without water, nothing would grow. Josefina twisted the shirt to wring it out and watched drops of water fall back into the stream and go on their way. Then she carefully spread the shirt on top of a bush. "The sun and the breeze will dry the clothes quickly today," she said, as she washed some socks. "Yes," agreed Anna. "Mama would have said, 'You see, girls, God has sent us a good drying day. Monday is laundry day, even in heaven.' And then Mama would have said, 'Put your rebozos up and shade your faces, girls. You don't want your skin to look like an old feather,'" added Francisca, who was always careful of her skin. The sisters laughed softly together and then grew quiet. Speaking of their Mama always made them thoughtful. Mama had died a little more than a year ago. The sorrow of her death was always in their hearts. Josefina looked at the stream flowing past and listened to its low rustling sound. Since Mama died, she had learned the truth. She had learned a truth that was both bitter and sweet. She had learned that love does not end. Josefina would always love Mama, and she would always miss her. Josefina knew her sisters were also thinking about Mama because Francisca said, "Look, see those yellow flowers across the stream?" She pointed with a soapy hand. "Aren't they evening primroses? They're in the shade. So they haven't wilted yet this morning. Mama used to love those flowers." "Yes, she did," said Clara, agreeing with Francisca for once. "Why don't you pick some, Josefina? You could dry them and put them in your memory box." "All right," said Josefina. Papa had given her a little wooden box of Mama's. Josefina called it her memory box because in it she kept all the things that reminded her of Mama, such as a piece of Mama's favorite lavender-scented soap. The box had been made by Josefina's great-great-grandfather. On its top there was a carving of the sun coming up over the highest mountain. And shining on the rancho just the way Josefina saw it rise every morning. The quickest, driest way to the primroses was to walk across a fallen log that made a narrow bridge over the stream. Josefina climbed up onto the log. She held her arms out for balance and began to walk across. "Oh, do be careful," warned Anna, because she was the oldest sister. Anna had become a motherly warrior since Mama died. Josefina did not think of herself as a brave person at all. She was afraid of snakes and lightning and guns and shy of people she didn't know. But she wasn't afraid of crossing the log, which wasn't very high above the stream anyway. She walked across, picked the primroses, and tucked them in her pouch. She let the yellow flowers stick out so they wouldn't be crushed. On the way back, she decided to tease Anna to make her laugh. She pretended to lose her balance. She waved her arms wildly up and down and wobbled more and more with each step. "Josefina Montoya," said Anna, who saw that she was fooling. "How can you be so shy and sweet in company when you're so playful with your sisters? You tease the life out of me. You'll make me old before my time." You sound like our grandfather," said Josefina as she jumped to the ground. She pretended to talk like Abuelo. Yes, my beautiful granddaughters. This was the finest trip I've ever made. Oh, these adventures. The adventures. But this was my last trip. Oh, these trips make me old before my time. All the sisters sang out together. Abuelo said the same thing after every journey. Abuelo was their mama's father. He was a trader, and once each year he'd organize a huge caravan. The caravan was made up of many carts, pulled by oxen, and many mules carried packs. The carts and the mules were loaded with wool, hides, and blankets in New Mexico. Then the caravan traveled more than 1,000 miles south to Mexico City. The trail the caravans used was called the Camaro Reel. When Abuelo got to Mexico City, he traded the goods he'd brought from New Mexico for things from all over the world. He traded for silk and cotton goods and lace, for iron tools, paper, ink, books, fine dishes, coffee, and sugar. The caravan would load up and start the long trip back to New Mexico. Abuelo had been gone more than 6 months. Josefina and her sisters were excited because they expected Abuelo's caravan to return any day now. Their rancho was always the last caravan stop before the town of Santa Fe where Abuelo lives. I can't wait until Abuelo comes, said Josefina. She thought that the arrival of the caravan was the most exciting thing that happened on the rancho. The wagons were full of treasures to be traded in Santa Fe, but the most important treasure the caravan brought was Abuelo himself, safe and sound and full of wonderful stories. Sometimes the caravan went through sandstorms that were so bad that they blocked out the sun. Sometimes robbers or wild animals attacked the caravan. Sometimes the caravan had to cross flooded rivers or waterless deserts. Abuelo loved to tell about his adventures, and the sisters loved to listen. I am going to go on the caravan with Abuelo someday, said Francisca, dreamily twirling a skirt in the stream. I'll see everything there is to see, and then I'll settle down and live in Mexico City with Mama's sister, our Tia Dolores. I am sure she lives in a grand house and knows all the most elegant people. Clara rolled her eyes and scrubbed hard with her soap. That's ridiculous, she said. We hardly know Tia Dolores. We haven't seen her for the whole 10 years she's been living in Mexico City. Francisca smiled a superior smile. I am older than you are, Clara, she said. I was nearly 6 when Tia Dolores left. I remember her. Well, said Clara tartly, if she remembers you, I am sure she won't want to live with you. I am sure she won't want you to live with her. Francisca made a face and was about to say something sharp when Josefina piped up. Anna, said Josefina, trying to keep peace. What do you hope Abuelo will bring on the caravan? Shoes for my 2 little boys, Anna answered. I hope he brings the plow Papa needs, said Clara. She was always practical. How dull, said Francisca. I'm hoping for some new lace. You think too much of how you look, said Clara. Francisca smirked. Perhaps you ought, she began, but Josefina interrupted again. Well, I know one thing we all hope Abuela will bring, she said cheerfully. Chocolate. Lots, said Francisca and Clara. They spoke at exactly the same moment, which made them laugh at each other. You haven't said what you're wishing for, Anna said to Josefina. She was squeezing water out of a petticoat. Perhaps you're hoping for a surprise? Perhaps, said Josefina, smiling. Truth is, she didn't know how to name what she wished for. What she wanted most was for her sisters to be at peace with one another. She wanted the household to be running smoothly, and Papa to be happy and laughing again. She longed for life to be the way it was when Mama was alive. Right after Mama died, Josefina had felt that the world should end. How could life go on for the rest of them without Mama? It had seemed wrong, even cruel somehow, that nothing stopped. The sun rose and set, seasons passed from one to another. There were still chores to be done every day. There were clothes to be washed, weeds to pull, animals to be fed, socks to be mended. But as the years passed, Josefina began to see that the steady rhythm of life on the rancho was her best comfort. Mama seemed close by when Josefina and her sisters were together doing the laundry or mending or cooking or cleaning. The sisters tried hard to do the chores the way that Mama had taught them. Every day they tried to remember their prayers and their manners and how to do things right. But it was not easy without Mama's loving guidance. Josefina looked at the primroses in her pouch and thought of Mama. Mama had such faith in them all. She brought out the best in them. Now that she was gone, they struggled. Francisca and Clara squabbled. Anna worried. Josefina often felt lost and unsure, and Papa was very quiet. Josefina sighed. She didn't see how the caravan could bring anything to help them. "Here comes a surprise," said Clara, "but not one you will like, Josefina." Josefina looked up. "Oh, no," she said. It was a small herd of goats. They were coming down the hill to drink from the stream. Josefina disliked all goats, and one goat in particular. The biggest, oldest, meanest goat was named Florecita. Florecita was a sneaky, nasty bully. She bit, she rammed, and she'd eat anything. Josefina was afraid of her. She frowned when she spotted Florecita at the edge of the herd. "Now, Josefina," said Anna when she saw her frowning, "you mustn't dislike these goats. This is our herd." Most of the rancho's sheep and goats were still in the summer pastures up the mountains, but this herd was kept close to the rancho to provide milk to drink and to make into cheese. It was a small herd that had belonged to Mama. She left the herd to Josefina and her sisters when she died. Josefina wished she hadn't. Mama had always protected Josefina from things she feared and disliked, and Mama had protected Josefina from the goats. "The goats are everything you are not, Josefina," Mama used to say. "They are bold and loud and disagreeable and mean. It's no wonder you dislike them." Josefina was sure that Mama never intended her to have anything to do with goats, so she avoided them as much as possible. But right now, Josefina saw Florecita headed straight for her. "She wants the flowers in your pouch," warned Francisca. Josefina put one hand over the flowers. She did not want Florecita to have them. They might be the last primroses of the year. "Shoo!" she said to Florecita, feebly waving her free hand. "Go away! Shoo! Shoo! Shoo!" cried her sisters with more force. Florecita didn't even slow down. She kept walking steadily towards Josefina. Her yellow eyes were fixed on the primroses in Josefina's pouch. "Wave a stick at her," suggested Francisca. "Splash her," suggested Anna. Throw a pebble at her, suggested Clara. But Josefina backed away. She had been poked by Florecita's sharp horns before, and she had no wish to be poked again. She scrambled up and stood on the log over the stream. Still, Florecita did not stop coming. Josefina took one backward step and then another, then splash! She missed her footing and fell off the log into the stream. It was very shallow, so she landed hard on the bottom. "Oh no!" she wailed. She saw that all but one sprig of primroses had fallen out of her pouch. The flowers were floating on the water. Florecita snatched them up in her mean-looking teeth. She chewed them, looking satisfied. Then the goat turned and sauntered off to rejoin the herd. "Are you all right?" Anna asked kindly. She helped Josefina to her feet. "You really must not let Florecita bully you like that." Josefina wrung out her skirt and smiled. "I tried to stand up to Florecita," she joked, "but I ended up sitting down, didn't I?" She laughed along with her sisters, but she was annoyed with Florecita. She was even more annoyed with herself for letting Florecita scare her. As she looked at the one sprig of primroses left in her pouch, she thought of another thing she wanted that the caravan could not possibly bring her: the courage to stand up to Florecita. Chapter 2. Abuelo's Surprise. The afternoon sun was so strong it made the ground shimmer. Josefina dipped the drinking gourd into the water jar and took a long drink. Like everyone else on the rancho, she was up earlier than usual after her siesta, the midday rest. Papa had heard that the caravan was not far away. It would come this afternoon. Everyone was eagerly bustling about, preparing for its arrival. Josefina poured some water into her cupped hand and held it to her face, cooling first one cheek, then the other. Then opened her hand and let the water fall on a cluster of flowers. Mama had planted these flowers, which grew in a protected corner of the back courtyard. Josefina's house was built around 2 square courtyards. The front courtyard was surrounded by rooms where Josefina and her family lived. The back courtyard was surrounded by workrooms, storerooms, and rooms for the servants. The 2 courtyards were connected by a narrow passage. Mama, with Josefina at her side, attended her flowers in the back courtyard with great devotion. She started them from seeds sent to her from Mexico City by her sister, Tia Dolores. Josefina remembered how pleased Mama had always been when the caravan brought her some seeds from Tia Dolores. It had always been a miracle to Josefina that the small brown seeds could, with water and Mama's care, grow into beautiful, colorful flowers. Since Mama died, Josefina cared for the flowers by herself, as best she could. Just now she sprinkled the rest of the water in the drinking gourd on them. I'm glad you remembered to water your Mama's flowers, Josefina." Josefina turned and saw Papa. He was so tall, She had to lift her chin to look at his face. "Things grew well for your mama, didn't they?" Papa added. "Yes, Papa," Josefina answered. "Mama loved her flowers." So she did," said Papa, dipping the drinking gourd into the water. "And I hear Floresita likes her flowers too." Josefina blushed. "Don't worry," said Papa. "You'll stand up to Floresita when you're good and ready. When you're ready." Josefina grinned a little bashfully. She watched Papa drink his water. Papa's eyebrows were so thick, he looked fierce until you saw the kindness in his eyes. All the sisters were respectful and rather shy of Papa. He had always been saving his words, but since Mama died, he'd become especially quiet. Josefina knew his silence didn't come from sternness or anger. It came from sadness. She knew because she often felt the same way. Mama used to say that Josefina and Papa were alike. They were both quiet, except with their family, but full of ideas inside. Papa didn't have Mama's easy manner with people. It had always been Mama who remembered the names of everyone in the village, from the oldest person to the newest baby. She remembered to ask if an illness was better or how the chickens were laying. She gave advice on everything, from growing squash to dyeing wool. Mama was well loved and well respected. She was Papa's partner. She ran the household while he ran the rancho. Josefina knew that Papa missed Mama with all of his heart. Papa tipped the gourd so that the last drops of water fell on the flowers. He smiled at Josefina and then strode off out the gate towards the fields. Josefina carried the water jar to the kitchen. "Oh, there you are, Josefina," said Anna. Her hands were covered with flour, so she had to use the back of her wrist to brush the sweat off her forehead. The heat of the cooking fires was making her face red and her hair stick out. Pots full of delicious-smelling concoctions sizzled, steamed, and burbled over the fires. There was always a big fandango in the evening when the caravan arrives. Neighbors from the village, friends of the Indian pueblo, and all the people traveling with the caravan were invited. They came to Josefina's family's house, to eat and drink and sing and dance and celebrate the caravan's safe return. Mama had always known just what to do to prepare for the fandango. But this was the first time Anna was in charge. Josefina could see that Anna was overwhelmed, even though Carmen, the cook, was helping her. 2 other servants were making tortillas as quickly as they could. Francisca and Clara were helping too. They were peeling, chopping, and stirring as fast as their hands could move. "Thank you for the water," said Anna. She handed Josefina a large basket. "Now please go to the kitchen garden and get me some onions." "I'll come too," Francisca said. "We need tomatoes." The kitchen garden was just outside the back courtyard. Josefina always thought the garden looked like a blanket spread on the ground. The neat rows of fruits and vegetables and herbs made colorful stripes. The squash made a yellow stripe. The chiles made a red stripe. The pumpkins were orange, and the melons were light green, and the beans were dark green. In between the rows, the earth was a dark reddish brown. Thanks to the water the girls carried up from the stream every day, the stick fence, like a blanket's fringe, surrounded the garden to keep hungry animals out. The sisters were all proud of the garden. Josafina had gathered a basketful of onions when suddenly she stood up. Francisca stood up too. The girls looked at each other. "Is it?" Francisca began. "Shh," said Josafina, holding her finger to her lips. She tilted her head and listened hard. Yes, there it was. She could hear the rumble and the squeak of wooden wheels. That meant only one thing. The caravan was coming. Francisca heard too. The girls smiled at each other, grabbed their baskets, and ran as fast as they could back through the gate. "The caravan! It's coming!" they shouted. "Anna, Clara, it's coming!" They dropped their baskets outside the kitchen door as Clara rushed out to join them. The three girls dashed across the front courtyard and flew up the steps of the tower in the south wall. The window in the tower was narrow, so Josafina knelt and looked out the lower part. Francisca and Clara stood behind her and looked over her head. At first all they saw was a cloud of dust stirring on the road from the village. Then the sound of the wheels grew louder and louder. Soon they heard a jingle of harnesses, dogs barking, people shouting, and the village church bells ringing. Next they saw soldiers coming over the hill, and the sun glinting on their buttons and guns. Then came mule after mule. It looked like 100 or more to Josafina. The mules were carrying heavy packs strapped to their backs. She counted 30 carts pulled by plodding oxen. The carts lumbered along on their two big wooden wheels. There were four-wheeled wagons as well, and so many people, too many to count. There were muleters, cart drivers, traders, whole families of travelers. There were herders driving sheep, goats, and cattle. Villagers and Indians from the nearby pueblo walked along with the caravan to welcome it. Francisca stood on tiptoe to see better. She put her hands on Josafina's shoulders. "Don't you love to think about all the places the caravan has been?" she asked. "And all the places the things it brings come from, too?" "Yes," said Josafina. "They come from all over the world, up the camel reel, right to our door." Most of the caravan stopped and set up camp midway between the village and the rancho, but many muleters and some of the cart drivers camped closer to the house, in a shady area next to the stream. Josafina saw Papa ride his horse up to one of the big four-wheeled wagons. He waved at its driver. "It's Abuelo! That's Abuelo!" Josafina cried. She pointed to the driver of the four-wheeled wagon. "Look! Papa is greeting him. See, there he is." Francisca leaned forward. "Who's that tall woman sitting next to Abuelo?" she wondered aloud. "She's greeting Papa as if she knows him." But Josafina and Clara had already turned away from the window. They hurried down from the tower. Josafina ran to the kitchen and stuck her head in the door. "Come on," she said to Anna. "Papa and Abuelo are on their way up to the house." "Oh dear," fused Anna as she wiped her hands and smoothed her hair. "There's still so much to do. I'll never be ready for the fandango." When Papa led Abuelo's big wagon up to the front gate, Josafina was the first to run out and greet it. Francisca, Clara, and Anna were close behind. Josefina thought she'd never seen a sight as wonderful as Abuelo's happy face. She handed the reins to the woman next to him and climbed down. "My beautiful granddaughters," said Abuelo. He kissed them as he named them. "Ana and Francisca, Clara and my little Josefina. Oh, God bless you, God bless you. It is good to see you. This was my finest trip I've ever made. Oh, the adventures. But I am getting too old for these trips. They make me old before my time. This is my last trip. My last." "Oh, Abuelo," said Francisca, taking his arm and laughing. "You say that every time." Abuelo threw back his head and laughed, too. "But this time I mean it," he said. "I've brought a surprise for you." He turned and held out his hand to the tall woman on the wagon. "Here she is, your Tia Dolores. She has come back to live with her mama and me in Santa Fe. Now I have no reason to go to Mexico City ever again." Josefina and her sisters looked so surprised. Papa and Abuelo laughed at them. Tia Dolores took Abuelo's hand and gracefully swung herself down from the wagon seat. Papa smiled at her. "You see, Dolores, you have surprised my daughters as much as you have surprised me," he said. "You're welcome to our home." "Gracias," Tia Dolores answered. She smiled at Papa, and then she turned to the sisters. "I've looked forward to this moment for a long time," she said to them. "I've wanted to see all of you, my dear sister's children." She spoke to each one in turn. You're very like your mama, Anna," she said. "And Francisca, you've grown so tall and so beautiful. Dear Clara, you were barely 3 years old when I left. Do you remember?" Tia Dolores took Josefina's hands in both of her own. She bent forward so she could look closely at Josefina's face. "At last I meet you, Josefina," she said. "You weren't even born when I left. And look, here you are, already a lovely young girl." Tia Dolores straightened again. Her eyes were bright as she looked at all the sisters. "I'm so happy to see you all. It's good to be back." The girls were still too surprised to say much, but they smiled shyly at Tia Dolores. Anna was the first to collect herself. "Please, Abuelo and Tia Dolores, come inside and have a cool drink. I'm sure you're tired and thirsty." She led Tia Dolores inside the gate. "You must excuse us, Tia Dolores," she said. "We haven't prepared any place for you to sleep." "Goodness, Anna," said Tia Dolores. You didn't know I was coming?" "I didn't know myself, really, until the last minute. I've been caring for my dear aunt in Mexico City all these years. Bless her soul, she died this past spring. It was just before Abuelo's caravan arrived. I had no reason to stay, so I joined the caravan to come home." "Yes," Abuelo said to the girls. "Your grandmother will be so pleased. Wait till Dolores and I get to Santa Fe. The day after tomorrow. What a surprise, eh?" Josefina could not take her eyes off Tia Dolores. As everyone sat down together, in the family sala. The room's thick walls and small windows kept it cool even in the heat of the afternoon. Francisca whispered, "Isn't Tia Dolores' dress beautiful? Her sleeves must be the latest style from Europe." But Josefina hadn't noticed Tia Dolores' sleeves or anything else about her clothes. "This is Tia Dolores," she kept thinking. "This is Mama's sister." Josefina studied Tia Dolores to see if she looked like Mama. Mama had been the older of the two sisters, but Tia Dolores was much taller. She didn't have Mama's soft, round beauty. Josefina decided, nor her pale skin or dark, smooth hair. Everything about Tia Dolores was sharper somehow. Her hands were bigger, her face was more narrow, and her gray eyes and dark red hair that was springy. Her voice didn't sound like Mama's either. Mama's voice was high and breathy, like notes from a flute. Tia Dolores' voice had a graceful sound. It was as low and clear as notes from a harp string. But when Tia Dolores laughed, Josefina was startled. Her laugh sounded so much like Mama's. If Josefina closed her eyes, it might be Mama's laughing. There was a great deal of laughter in the family sala that afternoon as Abuelo told the story of his trip. Josefina sat next to Abuelo, her arms wrapped around her knees. She was happy. It reminded her of the old days to sit with her family this way and listen to Abuelo tell about his adventures. This was the most remarkable trip I've had," said Abuelo. "Oh, the trip to Mexico City was dull enough. But on the way home, bless my soul, what an adventure. We were in terrible danger. Terrible, terrible. And your dear Dolores saved us." "Oh, but I didn't," Tia Dolores began. No, my dear daughter. You did save us," said Abuelo. He turned to Papa and the girls. "You see," he said, "I was so glad that Dolores was going to come with me. I finished all my business in Mexico City as quickly as I could. All went well until the day I came to Dolores' house to load up her belongings. Then the trouble began." He lowered his voice, pretending he did not want Tia Dolores to hear. "I had forgotten how stubborn your Tia Dolores is. She is perhaps the most stubborn woman in the world. What did she insist that we bring? You'll never guess. Her piano." Amazed, the girls all repeated, "Her piano?" "Yes," said Abuelo. He was pleased to have astonished them all. "Such a fuss and trouble. I told her it was too heavy and too big, but she said she'd sooner leave all her other belongings than her piano. So I grumbled, but I allowed the piano to be packed and loaded onto one of my wagons. We left Mexico City, and I complained about the piano every mile of the way." He shook his head. "Your dear Dolores never said a word. She just let me go on and on complaining. Well, then we came to Dead Man's Canyon. And do you know what happened?" "What?" asked the girl. "Thieves!" cried Abuelo in a voice so loud the girls jumped. "Thieves attacked the caravan. Oh, you've never seen such a fight. shouting, sword fights, gunshots. The wagon with the piano was just behind ours. We saw the two thieves climb up on it and push the driver onto the ground. Then 6 or 7 of our men rushed over and wrestled with the two thieves, trying to pull them off the wagon. With all the yelling and fighting, the oxen harnessed to the wagon were scarred. They bumbled into each other, were scared. They bumbled into each other, trying to get away. The wagon lurched forward right to the edge of a deep gully, and then crash! Over it fell into the gully. The girls gasped. Abuelo put his hand to his heart. God bless us and save us all. What a sound that piano made when it fell. He said, a thud, and then a hollow boom that rumbled like musical thunder. It sounded like a giant had strummed all the keys in one stroke. The terrible sound bounced off all the walls of Dead Man's Canyon. It seemed to grow louder with every echo. The thieves were terrified. They'd never heard such a sound in all their lives. Didn't they take off as if they were on fire? All of them ran away as fast as their thieving legs could carry them. I bet they are still running. Everyone laughed. Abuelo laughed most of all, remembering with pleasure how frightened the thieves were. When he stopped laughing, he said, after that I put the piano in my wagon. I never complained again. And so you see, Dolores did save us all, by insisting we bring her piano. Well done, Dolores, said Papa. But Abuelo, said Josefina, was the piano badly hurt? Tia Dolores answered, no, child, she said. One leg is splintered, and the top is scratched, but I think it will sound fine. Oh, Josefina blurted. May we see it? No, said Abuelo. We had to rebuild the crate. It's too much trouble to open it up. You'll just have to come to Santa Fe sometime to hear your aunt play. Papa cleared his throat. The girls and I have never seen or heard a piano. He said, may I open the crate? I'll close it up afterward. Tia Dolores turned to Abuelo. Please, she said. I'd like the girls to hear the piano. Abuelo laughed and shrugged. Of course, my dear, of course, he said. How can I say no to you after you saved my caravan? Tia Dolores kissed him. Then she and Papa led the girls outside to the wagon. The piano was in a big wooden crate. Papa pried a few boards off the crate. Tia Dolores climbed into the wagon. She reached into the crate and pushed back the lid that protected the piano's keys. She couldn't stand up straight, and she didn't have much room to move her hands. But she played a chord. And then, as Papa and the 4 girls listened, she played a spirited tune. Josefina felt the music strum through her whole body. It made her shiver with delight. The notes were muffled because the piano was in the wooden crate, but to Josefina the notes sounded as beautiful as bells, all chiming together in harmony. She had never heard music like the piano's music before. The notes were so full, so perfect and delicate. that Josefina imagined she could almost see them as they filled the air. Josefina listened. She realized that through the music, Tia Dolores was telling them how happy she was. The music expressed her happiness better than words ever could, because it made all of them hearing it happy too. Josefina stood still, barely breathing, listening hard until Tia Dolores stopped. "Oh dear," said Tia Dolores. "I'm afraid the piano's a little out of tune, and I'm a little out of practice." Gently she closed the lid over the keys. Josefina wanted very much to touch the piano case. She wanted to make the wonderful music happen herself, but she was too shy to ask Tia Dolores, so she said nothing. "Gracias, Dolores," said Papa as he helped her climb down from the wagon. "Oh, yes, gracias," said Ana, Francisca, and Clara. "You must all come to see me in Santa Fe," said Tia Dolores, smiling. "I'll play for you and show you how to play the piano yourselves." The three oldest sisters followed Tia Dolores back inside the house, but Josefina stood next to the wagon until Papa had finished closing the crate. She wanted to stay near the piano as long as she could. She knew she would never forget the way Tia Dolores' music had sounded, or the way it had made her feel. When Papa was finished, he saw Josefina. "You liked the piano music, didn't you?" he asked. "Oh, yes, Papa," answered Josefina. "I didn't want Tia Dolores to stop." Papa smiled. "I didn't either," he said. "Well, there will be plenty of fiddle music at the fandango tonight. You'd better go in now and get ready. The guests will be coming soon." "Yes, Papa," Josefina answered. She took one last look at the piano crate, then started back inside. As she walked, she thought, I wish there were some way I could let Tia Dolores know how much I love the piano music. I wish I could give her something in return. But what?" Later, when Josefina walked into the back courtyard, she knew the answer to her question. She thought of a fine gift to give Tia Dolores. "I'll give it to her during the fandango tonight," she decided. She was pleased with her idea. She thought Tia Dolores would be pleased too. Chapter 3. A Gift for Tia Dolores. "Stand still, Josefina," said Francisca. She was slowly and carefully brushing Josefina's hair with a brush made of stiff grasses. Abuelo had brought all four sisters beautiful blue silk hair ribbons. Francisca had put herself in charge of tying them for Josefina and Clara. Josefina fidgeted. She was grateful to Francisca, but she wished she'd hurry up. Josefina wanted to be ready for the fandango early so that she could prepare her gift for Tia Dolores. Clara tied her sash neatly, then undid it and tied it all over again. Francisca had already brushed Clara's hair and put the blue ribbon in it. Do you think I look all right?" Clara asked. Josefina and Francisca were surprised. It wasn't like Clara to worry about her appearance. Josefina was afraid Francisca might say something unkind. She was glad when Francisca looked at Clara for a moment and then said, "Seriously, you look very pretty. The blue suits you." Clara beamed. She reached up to touch her hair ribbon. It made Josefina happy to see her sisters getting along. "It's because Tia Dolores is here," she thought. Francisca and Clara were in complete agreement about Tia Dolores. They both admired her very much. Josefina smiled to herself. Francisca and Clara would be pleased if, when they saw her gift for Tia Dolores too. Finished, said Francisca. She gave Josefina's ribbon one last adjustment. You look fine. Use your wings and fly away now. Josefina, I can tell you're anxious to go. Gracias, Francisca. Josefina called back over her shoulder and hurried from the room. The sun had set. Cool evening air slid down from the mountains, bringing darkness with it. Small bonfires were lit in the front courtyard for light and for warmth. As she crossed the courtyard, Josefina could hear Anna and Carmen thanking some neighbor women who had come near early with dishes of food for the fandango. No one noticed Josefina slipping into the kitchen. She took a small water jar and slipped out again. In the back courtyard, Josefina knelt in front of Mama's flowers. One by one, she picked all the freshest and brightest colored flowers. She put them in the water jar. Josefina was careful to break the flowers off near the ground so that the stems were long. But she didn't disturb the roots. There were not very many flowers, so Josefina had to pick almost all of them in order to have a bouquet anywhere near big enough and beautiful enough to give Tia Dolores. The corner looked bare when she was through. It's all right, she told herself. Mama would approve after all. Tia Dolores was the one who sent Mama the seeds. So Tia Dolores should be the one to enjoy the flowers. They should be a gift for her. Josefina straightened the flowers in the water jar. The bouquet looked scrawny somehow. So Josefina slipped the blue ribbon out of her hair and tied it around the flowers in a big bow. There, she thought with satisfaction. That looks much better. She wanted the bouquet to be a surprise for everyone. She looked around for a place to hide it. She had just entered the narrow passageway between the front and back courtyards when she bumped into Papa.
What's this you've got there? Asked Papa, peering at Josefina over the tops of the flowers.
It's a gift for Tia Dolores, explained Josefina. I wanted to give her something to thank her for the music. It was too dark to see Papa's face clearly, but Josefina could tell by his voice that he was smiling.
I think that's a very fine idea, he said. I'll tell you what. I'm going to make a formal introduction of Tia Dolores to all our friends and neighbors at the fandango tonight. After I do, perhaps you will give Tia Dolores the bouquet.
Yes, I will,
said Josefina happily. Very well, said Papa. It will be our secret until then.
Gracias, Papa, said Josefina. After Papa left, Josefina put the jar of flowers under the bench in the passageway. No one would see it there, and she would be able to fetch it quickly when it was time to give it to Tia Dolores. More guests arrived every moment. They called out a chorus of greeting to each other as they crossed the front courtyard to the Gran Sala, the family's finest room. Because this was a very special night, the Gran Sala was lit with candles. Their wavering light made the guests' shadows swoop and dance on the walls. Soon the musicians struck up a lively tune on their fiddles, and the real dancing began. It seemed to Josafina that the dancers flew around the room with as much ease as their shadow had. Their feet hardly seemed to touch the floor at all as they whirled by in a blur of bright colors. No one twirled faster than Francisca. No one looked happier or more beautiful in the candlelight. Her dark curly hair seemed to shine like a black stone in the stream, and Josafina was glad to see that Ana had put her responsibilities aside for a while and was dancing with her husband, Thomas. All around the sides of the Gran Sala, older ladies sat holding babies in their laps so that the babies' young mothers could dance. The old ladies clapped the babies' hands in time with the music. Josefina and Clara were still too young to be allowed to dance, so they stood outside in the courtyard and leaned on the windowsill looking in at the dancers. Josefina's feet danced along with the music. It was impossible to be still. The music seemed to twist and turn in the air, wind its way around all the dancers, and find its way outside to tickle Josefina's feet, so that they just had to move. Every once in a while, over the music, a conversation, Josefina and Clara could hear Abuelo's voice. He'd be saying, "Boom! What a sound! Those thieves ran off, and I'll bet they're still running." Clara and Josefina grinned at each other. Abuelo was telling the story about Tia Dolores' piano over and over again. The girls noticed that the number of thieves grew larger every time Abuelo told the story. The person both girls liked best to watch was Tia Dolores. She was easy to pick out of the crowd because she was so tall, and because no one else had hair quite such a rich dark red. "She dances well, doesn't she?" said Clara as Tia Dolores swept by. "Yes," said Josefina. "She's as graceful as the music." Soon Papa came by the window and nodded to Josefina. Josefina nodded back. "What's that all about?" asked Clara. "It's a surprise," said Josefina, excited and smiling. "Stay here and you'll see." She scurried across the courtyard to the passageway where she'd left the bouquet. It was very dark. Josefina bent down and felt under the bench for the water jar with the bouquet in it. It wasn't there. "That's odd," she thought. Josefina stood up perplexed, and then she saw the jar. It was lying on its side near one wall. It was empty. "Where is the bouquet?" Josefina wondered anxiously. She looked all around the passageway. The bouquet was nowhere to be seen, but an odd white shape loomed in the back courtyard caught her eye. She walked toward it and gasped. Oh no! The white shape was Florecita! The goat must have broken out of her pen and found a way into the back courtyard. Josefina did not want to put Josefina back in her pen. Did not want to put Florecita back in her pen. When she turned away to get help, she stepped on something. She stooped down and picked it up. At first she didn't know what it was, and then she saw a few green stems held together by a trampled, mud-stained blue ribbon. Suddenly, Josefina realized what had happened. Florecita had eaten the bouquet. This was all that was left of the flowers she had picked for Tia Dolores. But that was not the worst of it. At that instant, Josefina saw that Florecita was saw what Floresita was doing. Calm as could be, Floresita was standing smack in the middle of what used to be Mama's flowers. She was chewing on a mouthful of stems. One hollyhock, root and all, dangled from her mouth. Josafina could see that no other flowers were left. All that remained were some scraggly, chewed, crushed, and broken stems, and scattered leaves and petals on the ground. Floresita turned her nasty yellow eyes on Josafina. The goat looked very satisfied with herself. Josafina was furious. "Floresita!" she hissed in her furious whisper. "You awful, awful animal! You've ruined everything!" Josafina was so angry she forgot to be afraid of Floresita. She marched right up to the goat and yanked the hollyhock out of her mouth. Floresita looked surprised. She looked even more surprised when Josafina swatted her on the back with the stem, saying, "How could you? You ate the bouquet and killed Mama's flowers! Oh, I hate you, Floresita!" Josafina shoved Floresita hard. Then she took hold of one of Floresita's fearsome horns and pulled with all her strength. "Come with me," she said. Josafina dragged Floresita to her pen and slammed the gate shut. "I hate you, Floresita," she said again. "I'll hate you forever." Josafina ran all the way back to the bench in the passageway and slumped down on it. There was nothing to be done. She looked at the dirty blue ribbon and the chewed stems wilting in her hand and fought back tears of disappointment. "Josafina?" a voice said. "What are you doing here in the darkness?" Josafina looked up. She saw Tia Dolores coming toward her. Josafina could hardly talk. She showed the sad-looking stems to Tia Dolores. "This was a bouquet for you," she said in a shaky voice. "But our goat, Floresita, found it and ate it. And she killed Mama's flowers, too." "Ah," said Tia Dolores. She sat next to Josafina on the bench. Slowly, Josafina explained, "I wanted to give you a gift to thank you for the piano music," she said. "So I picked all the best flowers. I tied my new hair ribbon around them. The flowers were so pretty. They grew from the seeds you sent Mama. I've been watering them since Mama died because I know she loved them. Now there are none left. There will never be any more. The flowers are dead." Tia Dolores was a good listener. She sat still and gave Josafina her full attention. Neither one of them noticed the noise and laughter coming from the Gran Sala, and the fandango seemed far away. When Josafina was finished explaining, Tia Dolores said, "Show me your Mama's flowers." Josafina led Tia Dolores to the corner of the back courtyard. "You see," she said, "there is nothing left." Tia Dolores knelt down. She looked at what was left of the flowers. She scooped up a handful of soil and rubbed it between her fingers, gently. She touched the short, bitten-off stems. Then she smiled at Josafina. "Don't worry," she said. "Your Mama planted these flowers well. The roots are deep and strong. You've kept them healthy, and by watering the soil, they'll live, I promise." She stood and brushed the soil off her hands. "Do you like caring for flowers?" she asked. Josafina nodded. "I used to help Mama." "Mama," she said, I brought some seeds with me when I left Mexico City," said Tia Dolores. "Perhaps you and I can plant them tomorrow." "Oh, could we?" said Josefina. "Yes," said Tia Dolores. "We'll wash your hair ribbon too. Now we had better go back to the Grand Sala." Papa met them at the door. "Josefina," he said, "where have you been? I introduced Tia Dolores, but then I couldn't find you." "Oh, Papa," said Josefina. "Florecita ate the bouquet. And then she almost ruined all the rest of Mama's flowers."
That's too bad," said Papa sadly. He looked around the courtyard. "Is Florecita loose?"
"No," said Josefina. "I dragged her back to her pen and shut the gate."
"You did?" asked Papa. "But I thought you were afraid of Florecita."
"I am," said Josefina. "I mean, I was. I guess just now I was so angry at Florecita, I forgot."
Papa laughed. "Well, we never know where our courage is going to come from," he said. "I am sorry about the flowers, though."
"Tia Dolores says the flowers will be all right," said Josefina. "She's going to help me plant new seeds tomorrow."
"Is she?" said Papa. He turned and smiled at Tia Dolores. "Well then, Dolores," he said, "that means you'll have to come back often. You'll have to visit us and see how the flowers are coming along."
"I will,"
said Tia Dolores.
"God willing."
"Come inside and have something to eat now," said Papa. "Anna would never forgive us if we didn't enjoy the food she's prepared."
Josefina followed Papa and Tia Dolores into the Grand Sala. She grinned to herself. "I guess the caravan didn't need to bring me the courage to stand up to Florecita after all," she thought. "It turns out I already had it, but I might never have found it if I hadn't picked a bouquet for Tia Dolores." An idea danced through Josefina's head just then, as quick as the flicker of starlight on water. The idea appeared and disappeared, but it was an idea that would come again and again all the rest of the night and through the next day, until it grew from an idea into a heartfelt hope. Chapter 4. Josefina's Idea. Never had Josefina been more eager to begin a day. The next morning she was up even earlier than usual, quietly so that she wouldn't waken Francisca or Clara. Josefina rolled up the sheepskins and blankets that were her bed. She dressed and slipped outside. The moon hung low in the sky. It cast such a strong, pure light that everything was bathed in silver or shadow. Josefina went to the kitchen. Early as it was, Carmen was already there grinding corn for the morning meal. Her husband was starting the kitchen fire. Carmen nodded good morning to Josefina and handed her a jar to fill at the stream, just as she did every morning. But this morning was different for Josefina. This was the morning of the day Tia Dolores was going to spend with her and her sisters. The huge front gate was closed, so Josefina stepped through the small door cut into the gate. She closed the door behind her and ran across the moon-washed ground to Abuelo's wagon. Standing on tiptoe, she looked in. There was the big crate with Tia Dolores' piano inside. Josefina poked her finger through the crack in the crate and touched the polished wood of the piano. She smiled when she remembered the pleasure its music had given her. Then she skipped down to the stream, thinking of the melody Tia Dolores had played. The tune stayed in her head as she did the early morning chores. She gathered eggs, singing it. She swept the courtyards, dancing to it. She piled wood next to the fireplaces in time to its rhythm. When the village church bell rang its call to prayers at 7 o'clock, it seemed to ring along with the tune. And when the family said good morning prayers together in front of the small altar in the family sala, dedicating their day's work to God, their voices seemed to raise and fall just as the piano notes had. The music seemed to be everywhere Josefina went. Tia Dolores, too. Tia Dolores was interested in everything. At breakfast, she said, "I want to see as much of the rancho as I can today." So after breakfast, Josefina led Tia Dolores through the orchard, past the cornfields, and to the stream. They filled water jars and carried them up to water the kitchen garden. Then they picked some fat pumpkins for Tia Dolores to take home with her to Santa Fe the next day. I am sure my mother has no pumpkins as big as these in her garden," said Tia Dolores. Wherever she went, Tia Dolores found something to praise. Josefina led Tia Dolores to the weaving room. There Clara showed her the sheep's wool she had carded, spun, and dyed. Tia Dolores admired the colors. "There are no colors finer than these in all of Mexico," she said. Tia Dolores was a good teacher. She showed Clara a faster way to knit the heel on a sock. She showed Francisca how to sew a patch over a hole so that it hardly showed at all. Josefina was in the back courtyard clearing away the dead stems Floresita had trampled when Tia Dolores joined her. "I've brought you some seeds to plant," she said to Josefina as she handed her a small package. "Gracias," said Josefina. "I'll help you for a while. Then I promised Ana I would make bread with her," said Tia Dolores. She began to dig holes in the soil for the seeds. Ana has lots of responsibilities, doesn't she?" "Yes." "Ana has lots of responsibilities, doesn't she?" "Yes," agreed Josefina. "It's hard for Ana. Mama ran the household so smoothly, but Ana doesn't know what to do, and Mama is not here to teach her." "Ana is young," said Tia Dolores as she covered some seeds with soil. It's a good thing she has you and Francisca and Clara to help her." Josefina nodded slowly. "We try," she said, "but sometimes—" She stopped. Tia Dolores gave her a questioning look. Josefina sighed. She dug a little hole in the soil. "You see," she said, "Francisca and Clara fight a lot. They're so different. Clara is careful and practical, and Francisca is so quick and fiery. When Mama was alive, she put a stop to their arguments before they began, but now, well, Ana tries, but she is too soft-hearted, and they won't mind her. I try to joke them out of fighting. Sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't. Blessed are the peacemakers," said Tia Dolores softly, "for they will be called the children of God." She smiled at Josefina. "You know," she said, It's perfectly natural for sisters to disagree. You should have heard your mamma and me sometimes. She was quite a few years older than I was. I am sure she thought I was a miserable pest. I wanted to be like her. I wore her best sash without her permission, and I lost it. Your mamma was very angry. She wouldn't speak to me for days. But she finally forgave me. Josefina realized suddenly, Tia Dolores misses her sister. She misses Mama too, just as much as we do. She said, I wish you could be here to protect these flowers from Florecita when they bloom. I'd love to see the flowers, said Tia Dolores, but you can protect them from Florecita. You aren't afraid of her anymore. You don't need me. You will make your mama's flowers bloom again and keep them safe, Josefina. I know you will. Oh, Tia Dolores, it's beautiful, said Anna. She draped the silk rebozo over her shoulders. Its colors were as bright as flowers. Gracias. It was an early afternoon, just after the midday meal. Anna, Francisca, Clara, and Josefina were gathered in the family sala. Tia Dolores had called them together. She had presents for them all. Francisca, said Tia Dolores, this is a sewing diary I made for you. She gave Francisca a little handmade book. There are sketches of dresses in it, and samples of materials, and notes about how to make dresses. Gracias, said Francisca. Eagerly she looked at the sewing diary. The dresses are so elegant, Tia Dolores, she said. I wish you could be here to help us make one of them. She looked up and joked. I'm afraid I will sew a sleeve on upside down. The notes and directions will help you, said Tia Dolores. Francisca looked doubtful, but I can't. Francisca looked doubtful, but I can't read, she said. None of us can. Oh, said Tia Dolores. Well then, just use your good sense. I'm sure if you and your sisters help each other, you will do very well. For Clara, Tia Dolores had brought a fine pair of scissors and sewing needles. Clara was very pleased because her gift was beautiful and useful. And this is for you, Josefina, said Tia Dolores. She handed Josefina a necklace, a small dark red stone surrounded by gold hung in a delicate chain. Josefina smiled. The necklace was lovely. Gracias, Tia Dolores, she said. Her hands were shaky with excitement as she put the necklace on. My, said Francisca, isn't that necklace quite grown up? Yes, indeed it is, said Tia Dolores firmly. And isn't Josefina quite grown up too? Francisca said no more. Tia Dolores, said Anna, how do you know what would be the perfect gift for each of us? Tia Dolores smiled. All the years I've lived in Mexico City, I looked forward to the caravans coming, she said. I knew Abuelo would bring stories all about all of you and your life here on the rancho. Sometimes he would bring a letter dictated by your mama. I felt as if I were watching you grow up even though I was far away. When I decided to come home, I enjoyed thinking about what present to bring each of you. Well, said Anna, I'm sorry we didn't know that you were coming. We have nothing to give you in return for your gifts. Oh, laughed Tia Dolores, this day with you is all the gift I want. When the afternoon had cooled into early evening, Tia Dolores and Abuelo walked into the village. They wanted to say a prayer at Mama's grave. They were also going to visit Papa's oldest sister, who lived in the village. Josafina and her sister sat in a corner of the front yard that was still warm from the heat of the day's sun. Every now and then they could hear Anna's little boys laughing with Carmen in the kitchen nearby. The sisters were peeling back the husks and roasting ears of corn. They were going to braid the husks together to make a long string of ears so that the corn could be hung out to dry. Josefina said, Hasn't it been nice today, having Tia Dolores here? Yes, said Anna. She has such a help to me, and she is so kind to my little boys. Tia Dolores is a very sensible, hard-working person, said Clara. That was her highest praise. Oh, Clara, protested Francisca, you make her sound as dull as these ears of corn. I found her to be elegant and graceful. Josefina decided the time had come to tell her sisters her idea. She picked up an ear of corn and peeled the husk slowly. What if, she asked quietly, we asked Tia Dolores to stay? No one said anything. They were all too surprised. Josefina went on. She could help us and teach us the way she did today. She wouldn't stay, said Francisca. She's used to life in Mexico City, where there are lots of grand people and grand houses. She doesn't want to live on a rancho. But she said she always loved to hear about the rancho when Abuelo came to visit her. Remember? Said Josefina. And she doesn't act fancy or put up airs. She likes it here. She was interested in everything. Yes, said Anna, but I think perhaps she has come home hoping to get married and start a family of her own. She's not too old for that, you know. She wouldn't have to stay here forever, said Josefina, just for a few months. And anyway, she is our aunt. We are her family. Clara picked up several ears of corn and put them in her lap. Well, she said in her flat, no-nonsense manner, even if Tia Dolores would be willing to stay, it wouldn't be proper for us to ask her. Papa would have to approve of the idea. He would have to be the one to ask her to stay. Josefina's heart sank. She hadn't thought of that. She knew Clara was right. Who wants to be the one to present the idea to Papa? Clara asked. I certainly won't. She turned to Josefina. It's your idea, she said. Do you want to talk to Papa about it? Josefina looked down at the ear of corn in her hands. No, she said in a small voice. Will you go to him, Anna? Clara asked.
You are the oldest.
Oh, I couldn't, said Anna. Papa might think I was complaining if I said that I need Tia Dolores' help. He might think that I don't want to do what it is my responsibility to do.
Oh, exclaimed Francisca.
She stood up and brushed off her skirt. I'm not afraid to talk to Papa. I'll just march right up to him and say, Papa, you must ask Tia Dolores to stay.
Anna, Clara, and Josefina looked at each other. They knew that that was not at all the right way to speak to Papa. It wasn't that Papa was stern or cold, but he was the patron, the head of the rancho, and the head of their family. The girls had never presented such an important idea to him before. It would have to be done politely and with respect.
Wait, Francisca, said Josefina. She stood up, too. I think all of us should speak to Papa. We should go together. That way Papa will see that all four of us would like Tia Dolores to stay.
Anna and Clara didn't move.
Come on, said Josefina. She grinned. Don't worry. I'll do the talking if you don't want to. Last night I had the courage to stand up to Florecita. Papa is much, much kinder than she is. The sisters found Papa near the animal pens. He was tightening the latch on the gate. He smiled when he saw Josefina. The latch was stronger now.
The latch is stronger now.
What was that voice? I don't know.
He said, we shouldn't have any more goats in Mama's flowers.
That's good, said Josefina. She swallowed. Francisca gave her a little shove forward. Papa, Josefina said, may we ask you something?
Papa looked at the four girls. Yes?
He said, do you think, Josefina asked carefully, that you could ask Tia Dolores to stay here with us for a while?
Ask her to stay? Repeated Papa.
Yes, said Josefina. Not forever, just for a while. She could help us. She could teach us the way Mama did. Please, would you ask her? Josefina saw a look of sadness cross Papa's face. He turned away.
I'll consider it, he said.
But Papa, Francisca blurted out, you must!
Josefina tugged on Florecita's sleeve and frowned at her to make her stop talking.
Gracias, Papa, said Josefina. She hesitated and then she added, we need Tia Dolores. Then she and her sisters left. What do you think Papa will do? Francisca whispered. She and Clara and Josefina were in their sleeping sala, getting ready for bed. Do you think he will speak to Tia Dolores? I don't know, said Josefina. I hope so. And if he does ask her, what do you think she will say? Francisca wondered out loud. Josefina sighed. I don't know, she said again. I think you're silly to wonder about it. Clara said, we'll find out tomorrow. Abuelo and the caravan will leave first thing in the morning. Tia Dolores will either leave with him or not. We'll just have to wait and see. Oh, I hate waiting, said Francisca. The three sisters smiled at each other. They all hated to wait. On that they certainly agreed. The next morning they were up early. Even Francisca, who was usually slow getting dressed, was ready and waiting with Ana, Clara, and Josefina next to Abuelo's wagon. They watched the servants load Abuelo's small trunk onto the wagon. Then, with sinking hearts, the sisters saw Tia Dolores' trunk loaded onto the wagon as well. "Papa didn't ask her," Francisca groaned. "Or maybe he did and she said no," said Anna. "She doesn't want to stay," Clara added. Josefina was so disappointed she couldn't talk. A lump rose in her throat, and she heard Papa and Tia Dolores and Abuelo coming. Suddenly, Josefina didn't want to stand there by the wagon 1 second longer. She couldn't bear to kiss Tia Dolores and Abuelo goodbye. Without a murmur, she slipped away, back inside the house. She went to the Gran Sala because it was the only room that was sure to be empty. As she walked into the cool dark of the Gran Sala, she remembered how it had looked the night of the fandango, full of life and music. Now there was nothing but shadows. Just then, in a corner of the room, Josefina saw a large dark shape. She caught her breath when she saw what it was. It was Tia Dolores' piano. Instantly, Felicity knew what that meant. Tia Dolores would never have left her piano unless Josefina flew across the courtyard and out to the front gate so fast it seemed as if she had wings on her feet. Tia Dolores caught her in her arms. "There you are, Josefina," Tia Dolores said. "I wanted to say goodbye to you." Josefina pulled back and looked at Tia Dolores' face. "I'm going to Santa Fe," Tia Dolores said. "I'm going to see my dear Mama, whom I have not seen for 10 years. But then I'll come back." "When?" asked Josefina. Tia Dolores laughed. "Soon," she said, "and when I come back, I'll stay as long as you need me." Josefina hugged Tia Dolores hard. Then Tia Dolores swung herself up onto the wagon. "Well, well, well," said Abuelo. He pretended to be cross. "Now it seems that if I want to see Dolores, I'm going to have to come here and see all of you girls, too. What a bother, what a bother!" he sighed. "At least I don't have to carry that piano with me today. Though, if we meet up with any thieves, I'll just have to frighten them off with my singing, I suppose." Then he kissed Josefina and her sisters goodbye and gave them his blessing. "Adios! Adios, Abuelo!" called all the girls as the wagon pulled away. "Adios, Tia Dolores! Come back soon!" Josefina sang out as she waved goodbye. As soon as the wagon was out of sight, Josefina hurried back inside. She went to the kitchen to get a jar. She wanted to fill the jar with water and to sprinkle on Mama's flowers. Tia Dolores will be back soon, she thought. I want the flowers to be beautiful when she returns. Josefina set off for the stream, whistling Tia Dolores' tune. And that concludes Meet Josefina. Josefina is a character that I've come to terms, and I really like her now, but for some reason, I really disliked her when I was younger. Before I had read the books, I disliked her, but now I really like her. Her books are fun, and I like her. She's sweet, and yeah. So, tomorrow we are going to be reading Josefina Learns a Lesson. I gotta get this video edited and wrapped up, and I will see you guys next time.